still here. Today, we will learn about concepts of business math. Compounded interest. People usually borrow money from banks or other lenders to start businesses or increase their business capital. Banks are a good place to keep money because it pays interest for deposits, compounded or computed quarterly. Banks too lend money and charge interest on the principal amount borrowed, compounded at any of these rates. Quarterly or every 3 months, semi-annually or every half year, and annually or yearly. What is the difference between a simple interest and a compounded interest? In a simple interest scheme, only the principal amount earns interest in a term. In compounded interest, at stated intervals during the term of transaction, which can either be quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, the interest is regularly added to the principal and the sum thereafter earns interest. Would banks earn more from using the compounded interest scheme on the loans they give out? Loans from banks have higher interest charges because they charge compounded interest and not simple interest. Bank deposits also earn more from this interest scheme. To understand this further, let us go back to Philip. Philip decided to borrow 12,000 pesos from Marco at a simple interest of 5% for every 6,000 for 6 months. How much interest must Philip pay Marco at the end of the term? What is the total amount that Marco should receive? The formula for simple interest is I equals P times R times T, where P is equal to 12,000 pesos, R is 0.10 or 10% since it is at 5% for every 6,000, and T is equal to 6 over 12 or 6 months in a year. I is equal to 12,000 times 0.1 times 6 over 12. Therefore, I is equal to 600 pesos. The formula for the total amount to be paid is A equals P plus I, where P is equal to 12,000 pesos and I is equal to 600 pesos. A is equal to 12,000 pesos plus 600 pesos. Therefore, A is equal to 12,600 pesos. Philip must pay Marco 600 pesos in interest at the end of the term of 6 months. If the principal is added to this amount, Marco should receive a total amount of 12,600 pesos. Philip borrowed 12,000 from a bank at a compounded interest of 5% for every 6,000 pesos compounded quarterly. How much interest must Philip pay the bank at the end of 6 months? What is the total amount that Philip has to pay the bank at the end of the term? We are given the following information. P is equal to 12,000 pesos, R is equal to 0.10 or 10% since it is at 5% for every 6,000, and T is quarterly. Now, we can solve for the interest and the total amount that Philip must pay the bank using the formula I is equal to P times R times T. His first quarter interest is I equals 12,000 pesos times 0.1 times 1/4. Therefore, I is 300 pesos. His new balance then would be A is equal to P plus I. 12,000 plus 300 is equal to 12,300 pesos. For the second quarter, I is equal to 12,300 times 0.1 times 1/4. I is equal to 307 pesos and 50 centavos. This makes his new balance at A is equal to P plus I. P is equal to 12,300 pesos plus 307 pesos and 50 centavos, which is equal to 12,607 pesos and 50 centavos. The total interest earned at the end of the term then would be computed as total interest equals new balance at the end of the term minus principal. That's 12,607 pesos and 50 centavos minus 12,000 pesos. Therefore, 607 pesos and 50 centavos. Based on the above computation, Philip must pay the bank 607 pesos and 50 centavos in interest at the end of the 6 months. He has to pay a total amount of 12,607 pesos and 50 centavos at the end of the term. What did you notice about the computation for compounded interest? The formula for computing for simple interest is also used. But in this case, another computation using the same formula is done for the second quarter. Did the principal change for the second quarter? Yes, a new principal is used. This is the principal based on the new balance for the first quarter. In which interest scheme would Philip pay more interest? The total amount based on a simple interest scheme is 12,600 pesos. On compounded interest, Philip has to pay 12,607 pesos and 50 centavos. He has to pay 7 pesos and 50 centavos more to the bank than to Marco if he borrows the exact same amount of money at the same term and interest rate. The different interest schemes used would mean a difference in the amount of interest paid. Is the difference of 7 pesos and 50 centavos significant? It may not be significant yet because the principal is not very big. Imagine how much difference in terms of interest would there be if you borrow millions of pesos. Loans with a compounded interest scheme are charged more interests. In what interest scheme would your savings earn more? Simple interest or compounded interest? Savings earn more in a compounded interest scheme. If you are to start a business, better borrow using a simple interest scheme and save your money in banks where compounded interest scheme is used. This way, you avoid paying more interests on your loans. Also, you earn more interest from your savings. For a compounded interest scheme, the interest is paid at the end of the term. Both the original deposit or your principal and the earned interest are retained in the deposit. Computations for the interest for the next terms are based on the new balance of the deposited account. Computing monthly amortization for installment schemes. Philip's business is doing well. He wanted to buy a new glass display case for his groceries, but he cannot afford to buy in cash. He opted to buy one on installment basis instead. However, he realized that it would be cheaper for him to pay in cash because the company adds an additional 20% per year for a display case bought in installment basis for 6 months. Should Philip buy in cash or installment basis? He checked his savings. He only has 3,000 pesos in the bank. A glass display case costs 4,000 pesos. He decided to buy one on installment. How much does Philip have to pay per month? The company adds an additional 20% per year if the display case was bought on installment basis for 6 months. First, use the formula you learned to compute for simple interest. I is equal to P times R times T, where I is interest, P is principal or the original cost of the product purchased, R is the rate at which the interest is to be paid, and T is the term or length of time the debt has to be paid. In this case, P is equal to 4,000 pesos or the principal cost, R is 0.2 or 20%, and then T is equal to 6/12 for a term of 6 months in 1 year. I then is equal to 4,000 times 0.2 times 6/12 or 400 pesos. Philip has to pay the company an additional 400 pesos in interest, also known as surcharge for installment schemes, after 6 months for the display case. He could have bought it for 4,000 pesos if he paid in cash. How much would be the total cost of the display case on a 6 months installment scheme at 20% every year? For this, we can use the formula A equals P plus I, where A is equal to the total amount one has to pay on installment purchases, P is the principal cost of the goods bought, and I is the interest or the surcharge added by the company on top of the original price. Therefore, A is equal to 4,000 pesos plus 400 pesos, or 4,400 pesos. Philip will have to pay a total of 4,400 pesos in 6 months because he chose to pay by installment. Would buying on installment basis be cheaper or more expensive than buying in cash? He has to pay 400 pesos more than if he pays in cash. Paying in cash when buying products is more often than not cheaper. How much should Philip pay per month? These payments or installments are also called monthly amortization. The formula for computing monthly amortization or payments on an installment basis is as follows. M is equal to A over N, where M is the monthly amortization, A is the total amount one has to pay on installment purchases, N is the number of months to pay on installment basis. M is equal to 4,400 divided by 6 for 6 months, or 733 pesos and 33 centavos. Therefore, Philip has to pay a monthly amortization of 733 pesos and 33 centavos for 6 months for the display case he bought on installment basis. That's the end of our lesson on computing interest and monthly amortization. In the next lesson, we'll discuss converting currencies. Kaya see you in the next episode, mga ka-learners!